going to be talking about my birth story, which is really weird, and I haven't even really thought through how I'm gonna do this. I'm just gonna open my mouth and hope that we cover it. Honestly, by this point I'm starting to forget stuff, so it's going to be actually quite nice to have this. I've made a big old mug of tea, and I'm having some Carrie's chocolate orange. So yeah, grab yourself a cuppa, grab yourself a warm drink, and here we go. Here is my birth story. So throughout your pregnancy, you obviously have discussions with your midwife about what you want and how in an ideal world you would want the birth to go, and we had discussed a lot of things, and I was very relaxed, you know. It was more like what will be, and I'm just going to roll with it at the time. But I did do some hypnobirthing classes. They were amazing to talk about all the breathing, getting yourself relaxed, you know, getting yourself in the zone. As I got towards the end of my pregnancy, a couple of things started to go wrong. So my iron levels dropped really low, which I ended up getting infusions for that because the tablets weren't working. And then second to that, my blood pressure got really high. So I ended up on, was it labetalol? It was a blood pressure tablet to bring it all down. So I ended up on that, and I'd always spoken to my midwife about how the thing that I probably didn't want out of everything was an induction. But I got to 41 plus 4, so 41 weeks and 4 days, and nothing was happening. I'd had a couple of sweeps by this point, nothing was progressing. My midwife got to the point that she was like, I would advise you to book an induction. It was a Friday, she phoned me. I was out with my mum actually, because my mum came up. To cut a long story short, Stephen would not have coped in surgery. The idea was that my mum was going to be there, and if I had to go into surgery, then she would be able to be there for that. I'm out with my mum, my midwife calls, we're having a chat, and she's like, you know, Sophie, I really respect your wishes, and ultimately it is up to you, but with the way that your blood pressure is going, I would advise you book an induction. So at that point we scheduled it for the Monday. So I had like this last weekend, it was really bizarre, of just us, you know, and it's such a surreal, weird feeling, because when you book an induction, you know it's coming. Like, I know you know it's coming when you're giving birth, but it's different when you have a scheduled day that it's all going to start happening. We ended up at the beach on the Sunday. It was a lovely day, and Monday I headed on in for my induction. So I headed in for 3. First thing they did for me, I think there's different things that they'll do, but for me it was it like a pessary? So they gave me that, and they have to leave that in for 24 hours for that to work. It didn't do anything. After 24 hours nothing had happened, so then they started me on the gels. So that was the Tuesday. The gels, they give you them every 8 hours, so they gave me the first gel, and then they waited, I think it's every 8 hours, and then they gave me the second gel. The gels were pretty uncomfortable to get put in, to be honest. It was like afterwards, after the gel went in, I would feel cramps. At one point in between all this, like the contractions were coming. I remember the nurse came in because she was monitoring me, because during an induction you have to get monitored every now and then. They'll put the machine on you, check baby's heart rate, and just make sure everything's okay. So she's like watching the machine, and she's like, are you feeling this, you know, because that's contractions. So I was feeling them, and they were getting stronger, but still nothing was really happening. So I had the second gel because we weren't really progressing, and honestly, like, I've lost track of the days at this point, but we headed into Wednesday morning. So I'd gone in on Monday, and we're now on Wednesday morning, and they're like, okay, we think we're going to be able to break your waters. So eventually they took me to the delivery suite, and that was maybe like 11 AM. At this point they told me that I was dilated just enough to break the waters, but that it was going to be a really tricky process, and they were going to have to get like the specialist midwife who had done this so many times and was an expert in it, because, you know, I was just there. It happened. She managed to break my waters. Weirdest feeling ever. And then at that point they put me straight on the hormone drip. It's like a drip to get things moving, and I did ask them at that point if we could just like hold off on the drip and, you know, see if it progressed naturally after the waters had broken. They were really not wanting to do that. I'm not entirely sure why, but they were just pushing for the hormone drip. I mean, they said that I could, but they said that they thought that the best thing was for the drip. So obviously you go by them, don't you? And they were a really lovely supportive team. So I was like, right, you know what, they know their stuff, so I'm just going to get the hormone drip. So that started and the contractions very quickly kicked in. I think they broke my waters at midday, it was about 12. They actually allowed me to have some food beforehand, which then I proceeded to sick up. So that was lovely. But honestly, like, the food was amazing. I was absolutely starving. I don't think I'd been able to eat that morning because I was getting the induction or something like that. So I had like some digestives and they were the best digestives ever. But yeah, that didn't stay down very long. And then like the pain was really ramping up. So I'm trying to use the gas and air. Not really sure how to use it. I think I got there in the end, but that does make, well, for some people it makes you really like woozy, you know, and I was saying like really strange things and just felt a bit like out of it. But honestly, it just wasn't even scratching the surface. I could not see myself getting through a long labour without something. At the hypnobirthing classes, we'd spoken a lot about all the different options, like the pain meds, the different routes that you can take, and I knew I needed something. They told me I was in for a long haul. I don't know how they knew, but obviously they can just tell based on you and your situation, and they knew it was going to be like at least like a 10 to 14 hour labour, which it was. At this point I'm like, right, I need to do something, you know, I cannot deal with this pain. And I was really keen to get the epidural. I have a lot of fear about like health anxiety, you'll know that. I filmed a video on this channel about it before, and I always worry about what will happen, what could go wrong. So that was my biggest thing with the epidural, was just that I would overthink it, you know, something bad could happen. But honestly, in that moment I was in so much pain and not dealing with contractions well, that I was like, I just want this. I'm not even going to overthink it, I just want this epidural. So they went through the big spiel, and I remember sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, please just get to the end of the spiel. Like, I've accepted that I want it, but they have to tell you all the risks and all the different things. And I felt like that went on for hours. So we got to the end of that and I was like, yep, it's fine, still want the epidural. So he came along maybe like 10-20 minutes later, and by this point, I think it's like 4 in the afternoon, I got the epidural. Best thing I ever did. Best thing. There's a photo of me that Stephen has before the epidural in agony on the gas and air, and there's a photo of me after it, and I'm like chilled out on the bed, I'm having a little nap. Honestly, I got the epidural and then I just slept. It was fantastic. So they check you every 4 hours, or at least they were checking me every 4 hours. I'm not sure if that's standard. And everything was fine, it was progressing, it was happening, that was great, it was positive. We got to, was it like 10, 11 at night? Things were like changing a little bit. The heart rate was a little bit up and down, so they ended up putting in this little monitor that was like attached to Florrie's head so that they could monitor things. The heart rate was very up and down, they were quite worried about that, so they had me on different sides trying to get a better reading and all sorts. They had like the doctor in a good few times. Then I started to feel like pressure, and I kept saying to them, you know, I'm feeling this pressure. It's not like really painful, but I can feel it, it's uncomfortable. And this was still with epidural and like the top-ups of that. They kind of just weren't really that fussed about that. They were like, okay, that's fine, like we'll just carry on and we'll check you at the next like checkpoint. This is the bit I wish I'd been more firm on, because I didn't really know that I could be like, right, no, do you know what, I want you to check. So I just carried on, and then eventually I'm like, this really isn't right, like there's something going on there. Pressure, it's big, I need you to have a look. So they had a look, and sure enough, she was there. She was ready to come. The head was right there. There was no needing to wait for her to come down, like the birth canal or anything. She was ready to go. So at this point, it was like alarms, 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 you know, get this baby out, because obviously the heart rate had been all over the place, and she'd obviously been moving down, getting ready to come. So I think they were a bit worried about her at that point. So the doctor came in, and immediately he was talking about forceps. You know, I think they just needed this baby out. So he had like his tray with all the equipment, you know, and I'm like, it's fine, like it is what it is. If you need to do that to get the baby out, you know your stuff. If you think this is, you know, emergency quick scenario, go for it. I think he was like, right, we'll just give her like a little minute and see how it goes. So you can't feel the contractions when you've got an epidural, so the nurse has to tell you. They were like, right, we're going to start pushing. So the nurse would tell me when the contraction came, and I would push. It was absolutely hilarious. I got her out in 3 pushes. At one point they were like, breathe, breathe, seriously breathe, because I was just, you know, pushing down, and I was bright red. I wasn't taking any breaths, so they were like, stop, like breathe and pant, you're absolutely fine. 10 minutes of pushing. I think he quickly realised with the pushing that she was coming, that he didn't need the forceps. 10 minutes later, Florrie was born. Now, my mum was in the room for this whole thing until the emergency kicked off and they wanted the baby out. It was quite a small room. They needed a lot of staff at that point. I don't know, I think there was like 5 or 6 people in the room. So anyway, she got sent out, which was such a shame because she was so close to seeing the birth, and it was really only one midwife that actually had an issue with it. I think if she hadn't have been there, my mum might have been there for the moment. But Stephen was there, and I was quite shocked because I honestly always thought he would pass out, but he actually saw Florrie coming out, and he says it was like a really, really special moment. So that was lovely. And then what happened was, because my mum was out in the corridor when she was born, obviously she came out and they put her on my chest. That was just so amazing, just having her on me. Stephen went out to tell my mum. My mum already knew, like one of the midwives had gone out and told her, which I thought was a bit much, but anyway. So he's having a chat with my mum, they're obviously like cuddling and celebrating, and I'm getting sorted, you know. So they're stitching me up and Florrie's on my chest, and because Stephen left the room, I had maybe like 30 minutes. It's really hard to know about the timings, but I had like 30 minutes of her just on me, just staring at me, and it's actually so emotional thinking about it. But I absolutely enjoyed soaking in that moment, just the two of us, had on my chest. So Stephen came back in, my mum got to see Florrie, and then at this point it was the first breastfeed, so we did that, and yeah, we had like 2 or 3 hours in that room, you know, getting like the first photos, having those amazing, incredible moments breastfeeding, and then got wheeled to the ward. I can't remember what time Stephen left, but it was the early hours. I felt awful because I went into the ward with Florrie and she just was crying her eyes out, and they were obviously all trying to get a bit of rest, and I just appear with this baby at like 5 in the morning and I had no idea what to do. You know, like first time mum, you're like, how do I help? How do I stop the crying? So I was just holding her and shushing her and feeding her and just trying so hard. It's really tough that they send the partners home and then whoever's with that baby is like on their own. That's really, really hard going. I couldn't wait for Stephen to come back in the morning. But that's it. It was a really positive induction. Granted, it took a little bit of time to get going, but once we got there, it was incredible. If I was ever lucky enough to have another one, if we decided to have another one, then I would absolutely 100% get an epidural if that opportunity came, and if I felt I needed to do that, because it was just such a positive experience. The guy was so sweet when he was putting it in as well, because he was like, yeah, my wife's had 2 and every time she's had an epidural. That just made me feel so reassured. But yeah, positive induction experience, all went well. Little Toots arrived, and honestly I wouldn't change that much. The only thing I would change was being like a bit more fussy with, you know, can you check, because I feel like stuff's happening down there. And maybe the next time if I did have an induction, I would ask them to hold off on the hormone drip. But there we have it. That was my birth with Florrie. Honestly, if we had another one, if that was ever our decision, if we were lucky enough, I would love to go naturally, so to speak. That would be lovely for the next one. But the first one, honestly, really positive experience, and it was a really nice way to bring her into the world. I was able to sleep until she arrived, and that was lovely. Okay, I'm gonna go. I think Toots has woken up. I'm just watching her on the camera. My tea is cold, so I'm gonna heat it up in the microwave. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it was a little bit interesting. And if you're watching this because you've searched for a positive induction story, then you can have it. Best of luck to you, sending all my love, and it's just the most wonderful feeling once that little baby is in your arms.